talaqi is the learning period. And that's the period of the tabi'een taking from the sahaba. Because what the tabi'een did is they knew, all right, here's 10,000 people, and they lived with the Prophet ﷺ, and we have to get all of this information to understand what happened. And so they went around sitting with these people and listening and memorizing and doing all these things. That's the talaqi period. And then the last phase is the tadween phase. And this is the period that begins with the tabi'een, Imam Malik's generation. He's really the first one to write down the hadith. They were written down. Abu Hanifa had his hadith written down and other ones. But this was the period that they said, we have to get this stuff down so it doesn't get lost. So preserving knowledge. One, they had primarily preservation of Quran. So tadween of Quran, which happens during the lifetime of Uthman, obviously. But by this period now, you have the tashkil, the tanqid, diacritical marks, and then you have the tahzeeb. So the Quran, and now it's being produced. So the Quran is preserved. And then you have the hadith. And so you have all these different scholars collecting hadith. And Imam Malik really begins that with the Muwatta. I mean, that's the first real book of hadith, even though and then you had Quran, hadith, and then you had grammar. Like they actually started thinking about grammar, writing these things down. Tajweed. I mean, if you think about phonetics in the West, we didn't start thinking about phonetics until 18th, 19th century. So we don't know how Shakespeare was really pronounced because there's no science of phonetics. We don't know how Chaucer sounded. We have ideas about how he sounded, but we don't really know because there was no science to preserve that. We don't know how Koine Greek sounded. So we don't know how the Greeks at the time of Jesus spoke. So when we recite the New Testament, we don't recite the New Testament as it was recited at the time of Jesus. We recite it how we think they probably spoke it at that time. And the same is true, even oddly enough, with Hebrew. So even though the Torah, because it was the Muslims that got the Jews onto phonetics and realizing this is a great idea, identifying points of articulation, identifying the qualities of letters. This was all done right at the beginning. So it's a stunning accomplishment. So I know exactly where Bad is pronounced. I know exactly where the point of articulation is. I know that you can either derive it from the right side or the left side. Bad. You have to use one side. Like I'm left-handed, so I actually do it on my left side. Omar was ambidextrous. He did it on his left and right side. They said, "Can Omar yamtiq al-bad min janibayhi?" He could pronounce the bad on both sides of his mouth. So, and then the attributes of the letters, to know that sin, sibilant is a new word, but they knew that the sin was a hams letter. They knew the jim was a shidda letter, that the way it's pronounced, da, the articulation. So the attributes and the points of articulation were all preserved. That's tajweed. So we know exactly how the Quran sounded at the time of the Prophet. We know they had idgham, assimilation. Sirajan wahaja. They didn't say sirajan wahajan, because that tanween is followed by one of the Yarmalun letters, right? So there's an assimilation. All that was preserved. That's part of the tadween period.